I would argue that you can free a slave physically, but you can't always free a slave mentally. So I would say that there was still people, I mean, living a rural life is hard. And if you've experienced, what's it called? What's the syndrome called when you fall in love with your captor? Stockholm syndrome. So I would argue that there would have been a percentage of us that would have experienced that. That would have longed for the comfortability, the security, even under torturous, barbaric conditions, they may have favoured that if given a chance. So there are small portions of throughout history, to be fair, because I mentioned the Tacky Rebellion, that's not the only time that we find that Maroons have fought against blacks.
Tacky's rebellion was a rebellion of enslaved Akan people known as Coromantee and other Akan tribes that started in April 1760 and ended in July 1760 in the modern-day Jamaica, led by King Tacky. On the 8th of April, Tacky and his followers attacked the plantation where he worked, killing the owners and freeing all enslaved persons. Former slaves joined in the revolt and word soon spread to other plantations. By dawn, they had fought their way through estates, killing several European settlers and estate owners. Upon hearing the news, the Lieutenant Governor of Jamaica commanded the Maroons to fight Tacky and his men and kill any Obeah leader. This revolt could not be quelled for many months, but sadly the rebels were tracked down and killed by some Maroons. Tacky was reportedly shot dead and his head was cut and displayed in the center of town to indicate that the rebellion had stopped and freed slaves were in fact in danger. Many enslaved people committed suicide to avoid being recaptured and sold off to different masters. Finally, the British reinforced order and conducted a mass unmarked burial for all enslaved people killed during the revolt. In all, about 400 enslaved persons were executed, about 600 were sent to be enslaved workers in the Bay of Honduras for their part in the revolt, and this resulted in the British passing a bill that imposed a prohibition on the number of enslaved Coromantee people entering Jamaica.
When the Maroons in Trelawney Town were deported to Nova Scotia, they linked up with what would have been a black loyalist community. So people that had fought in America, blacks that fought in American wars were given a portion of land.
You mean Confederate wars? What was Confederate wars?
Yeah, so then, and this would have been in the early 1800s.
Right.
Now.
So remember, originally I was asking, how did we get these Maroon communities everywhere? So,
this is the thing.
So there was the Jamaican, then there was the Nova Scotian, and these were the only two Maroon communities in the world.
No, there are Maroon communities in North America. But I mentioned North Carolina.
At that time, though. So
where
did all these communities come from?
Any time you find in the mid 18th century, right up to the beginning of the 19th, what you find is successive slave rebellions, and then once those slaves find communities, they're called Maroon communities.
From very early, when they were introduced into the New World, enslaved Africans started escaping from their Spanish captors. Some either joined indigenous people, while others or set up communities of their own in the woods or forests. Some chose mountainous areas to set up their settlements. Now, the communities which they formed were called Maroon because they were kind of secluded, from outsiders. The communities which the escaped people formed were so well established that even Francis Drake enlisted several Maroons during his raids on the Spanish, when the British and the Spanish were struggling over territories in the New World. So Maroons were known for their bravery. Most of them were warriors. Now, the communities that the Maroons created had to contend with great difficulties just to survive. And the white colonists did not make life any easier for them. And they often tried to starve them into extinction by cutting off their food supplies where possible. Against all odds, a number of these Maroon communities survived through farming, crops, and hunting. Some even managed to grow their population by assimilating more black people who escaped from plantations. They were very protective of their autonomy and would even go and raid plantations and harass planters, thereby instilling great fear in the planters, who dreaded a massive revolt of the enslaved people. There were Maroon communities in places like Haiti, whose leaders spearheaded the 6-year rebellion against the white plantation owners that preceded the Haitian Revolution. There were other Maroon communities in Cuba and Puerto Rico, and in many other places such as St. Vincent, Dominica, Guyana, Panama, Suriname, and Colombia. There were others also in Mexico, and from the Amazon River Basin to the southern United States, primarily around Florida and the Carolinas. Unfortunately, most of the early Maroon communities were vanquished, and by 1700, most of them had disappeared from the smaller islands.
Right, so a Maroon community, by definition, is just any revolting community, any community that's found freedom,
any slave result that ends up in a community,
independent
outside.
community. Now we classify as removed.
It's classed. Okay.
That doesn't mean that they are in organized somehow relationship to the other ones. Well, they might not even know about other ones, but they are Maroons.
Well, to be fair, the Leeward and the Windward. So, the Windward tribe and the Leeward and the Windward are used as terms to describe whether your community is going against the wind or going towards the wind. Okay. So the Windward Maroons in Moortown, Nannytown, Scots Hall, and Charlestown would have been known as Windward Maroons. They was facing the wind. And we in the cockpit country would have been a Kompong and Trelawney Town were known as Leeward Maroons. Now, the reason why there became distinct differences is because in the Leeward territories, there was the cockpit country is the most inhospitable land. So it would have been a place where you would have found the last vestiges of the Arawak and Taínos. So there was a closer admixture of people on the Leeward side than the Windward. The Windwards were able to kind of maintain a stronger, and this is why I mentioned the Cromanti burial ground, the ASAFO burial ground. It was clear that even though we was one unified fighting force on the sides of the islands, we still had different practices. So from internally, we would have had different burial practices, different funerary practices, potentially, and this can't be proved because we've got oral tradition, different spiritual practices.
The Comanche, again, that's the amalgamation, is it? That's the one that's all of... Yeah. And then we've got
a Congo burial ground in Akombong as well. So, and I think it's important because it's a little known fact that there were different tribes that made up what we now know as Maroon. So, as an ASAFO, a warrior, so I don't think you even explain the term ASAFO. Asa is the Twi term for war, and Fo is the term for people. So, loosely translated in English, it means warrior people. And the education system that was instituted for communities, for survival purposes initially, was as a warrior and a priest. These were the two approaches we use to fight colonialism and embed a spirit of resistance and rebellion in our children.
So these are that term has always been part of the Maroon.
Well, yeah, I mean, if you look at Moortown, that we've got a yard, a building called the ASAFO Yard. It's spelled like this. So ASAFO is spelled ASAFO, and ASAFO Yard is spelled ASAFU. ASAFU. So it's the same term. You'll find the Sankofa bird, you'll find a number of Andinka symbols painted outside that building. And it was the area that we used to plan our military strategies. or try to unify, because what you said is right. We're from two separate sides of the islands, and we'd use the abeng and the talking drums to speak with each other. I mean, the Cromanti language has been lost now. My great-grand spoke it, but I think that generation, we've not done a good job in our generation of maintaining the language, to be fair. And I think maybe moving forward in terms of our education, I think it's something that needs to be brought back in.